Good Bones by Maggie Smith. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible. And for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shanty chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. Rain really is pouring down, isn't it? As we enter into the 8th month of a stay-at-home order during a global pandemic. The floods surely are rising, aren't they? As we expose and uncover and learn about the pervasive racism in our nation. The wind surely is beating upon this house, isn't it? As wildfires threaten our homes and our churches, our livelihoods. In the next few months, our church council will begin planning for the next year. They'll begin developing a budget for our next year of ministry together. It seems foolish. Making plans right now feels so foolish when vacations and trips and time with family have been canceled. When things we hoped would happen couldn't. When there's no end in sight to this reality. But when the rains pour down and the floods rise and the winds beat against the house, Christ calls us to check the foundations, to make sure that they are still made of rock, that our foundations haven't turned to sand. It is time now to look to our foundation, to look to the infrastructure of our church, of our congregation, of our communities, and make sure that the bones are still good. Rain, floods, and wind, pandemics, racism, and wildfires change the landscape of our communities. So our infrastructure might need to be different than it has been. For example, in our church's history, our building used to be just a sanctuary. And then as time went on, the needs changed. We added on bathrooms, we added on a kitchen, we added an office and an education building. Over time, the landscape changed and our infrastructure needed to change too. At some point, we added internet access in our church building because our world changes. So again, as our world is changing rapidly and drastically with every day, every week, our infrastructure might need to change too. As our council plans a budget for the next year, we know that budgets are not neutral documents. Our budgets communicate our theology. They communicate what we value and what we believe about God and our neighbors. So the first part of our budget is for our infrastructure. That first part of our budget pays for salaries and other staff costs. It pays for our building to be cleaned, pays for our internet bill, it makes sure our insurance is paid, it connects us to our denomination through apportionments, it cares for our building and for any updates or tending to any issues that arise. The infrastructure part of our budget makes sure that we have the staff and the space needed to do ministry in our community. When Jesus became an adult, he left Nazareth and settled in Capernaum. He preached in the synagogue there, he taught in the synagogue there often, and it was there that he met his friend and disciple Peter. Peter lived there, his house was there on the edge of the Sea of Galilee, because Peter was a fisherman. Jesus spent lots of time at Peter's house. There's only one mention of Jesus actually being at Peter's house, but it is tradition and legend that they spent lots of time there. We also can figure this out because of how Christians throughout the centuries have treated this site of Peter's house in Capernaum. Archaeologists have uncovered the original Peter's house, the place where Peter was. And then they can see that Peter's house was plastered over and all of the cups and glasses turned into jugs for oil, turned into large plates for sharing the Eucharist. They can tell that the place of Peter's house was turned into a place of worship. Centuries later, there was an even bigger church built on the spot. It was built in the shape of an octagon for some reason. Now, over the spot is a modern church in that same octagon structure, but that is built for modern communities to gather. In the middle of the sanctuary, there is a glass plate in the floor so that you can see down to the old octagonal church. I think what is clear about this specific site in our Christian history is not that the early Christians were trying to keep Peter's house intact so that it would forever be Peter's house, because it didn't need to be Peter's house anymore. The needs of the community changed. They needed a larger place for gathering with other Christians, and then an even larger place for gathering with other Christians. Maybe they needed part of these buildings to be mission headquarters where they could get together and plan for how they were going to serve the wider community, how they were going to go out and serve and preach and share the good news with people, to seek justice in Capernaum. And now the modern structure that is there serves a modern audience, serves a modern congregation into the future. They have different needs today than they did when Peter's house stood on the spot. Creating infrastructure doesn't mean creating structures that are going to be exactly the same for time and all eternity. Creating infrastructure means gathering the tools we're going to need for this time and place, for this community with the needs that it has now and the needs we can anticipate in the days and years to come. Our infrastructure must be flexible, just as the infrastructure in our cities are always worked on and improved. Our streets, our lights, our street lights, our street signs, they're always improved for greater safety, for greater efficiency, and to serve the new needs as they arise. In the coming weeks, we will explore what it means to be a disciple, because the rest of our budget supports those ministries. It supports our ministries of worship, of devotion, compassion, justice, and evangelism. And we're going to get into what all of that means in the coming weeks. But before we do, it is important to check on our foundation, to lay a solid foundation for our discipleship together. Our lives of discipleship together that call us to worship, devotion, compassion, justice, and evangelism become a lot simpler when we build a solid foundation of strong yet flexible infrastructure. In the next week or so, if you are on our mailing list, you will receive a pledge card, and I invite you to fill that out so that your council can begin planning our budget for the next year. If you are not on our mailing list, we will also have a digital pledge card available you can fill out. We know that this is a really challenging time for a lot of reasons. So please just be honest about what you can foresee and what you can expect in your pledges for the next year. Additionally, this pledge card does not just ask you for a pledge of finances, but it also asks you for a pledge of your time and your talent. What is it that you bring to our community that you would like to offer on the altar of God? What would you like to offer to our community in service and in time so that we can be disciples together? There is so much that we cannot do right now. I know that you are feeling this with me. There are limits about where we can go and how we can be together. But this is one thing we can do. We can plan for our next year together and create a solid foundation for our life of discipleship together. We can become disciples of Jesus Christ no matter what. Last Sunday, our church held its annual Charge Conference, which is an annual meeting where we do some official business of the church. One of the things that happens there is the election of leaders for our church council. So please join me in celebrating and welcoming our leaders onto our church council. Our chair for the next year, starting in January, is Susan Wigley. Our treasurer will continue to be Denise Mabry. Our pledge secretary is Trisha Carlson. Our secretary is Patty Shueri. Our trustee and facilities lead is John Downs. And our lay member at large is Sandy Griggs. Please join me in celebrating our leadership for the 2021 year.
Thank you to everyone who contributed to our community mural from our last worship series. We will finish this up and get it hung in the next week or so.
Join us for Soul to Soul Tuesdays at 7 p.m. They are class meetings for the 21st century in which we check in on our soul and do a true inventory of how we are doing. The link is on our Facebook and in our newsletter. Additionally, please join us on Thursdays at 6 p.m. for Faithful and Inclusive, a curriculum on the Bible, sexuality, and the United Methodist Church. You can get that link in our newsletter or on our Facebook as well. Our hygiene closet will be open again on Tuesday, October 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. If you need hygiene supplies or diapers, please wear a mask and join us on the back porch to get what you need. Please consider supporting our mission by giving online at this link. You can also give by text at this number or by mailing your gift to our P.O. Box, P.O. Box 537 in Ording. Thank you so much for all your generosity and for all the ways you serve our community. We really couldn't be church without you.